I wanted to begin with an initiative you've been heavily involved in relation to the hospitality industry, an industry that's been quite heavily impacted by COVID-19. Tell us a little bit more about the initiative and why you've become so involved in it.
So you've asked me about the hospitality industry, and the information that I've gleaned over the last 2 to 3 weeks that I've become involved in a particular initiative is that it is definitely an industry that's in a lot of pain at the moment. We would all probably know that it's one of the biggest employers in Australia. I think it's the fourth largest sector. And within the space of about 2 days, up to 900,000 people have been affected, with businesses being closed down, retail as well, obviously. But the area that I'm working in is in the hospitality space. So there's a group called Worksmith, which have a very active Facebook page and are really building the community and bringing that community together. And I was invited to join a team of people to look at how can we put together information that is really listening to that base of people and finding out how can we get that information to them as effectively as possible. So we have been working on putting together webinars involving specialists across a whole range of areas that are delivering information in a way that is accessible, obviously, and touching on all the key areas where people working in the hospitality industry need to understand what they should be doing at the moment to survive, and also to not become despairing and to prepare for the future and for the end of COVID-19. So it's been interesting on 2 levels for me, working with this team of people that have been brought together from different places who are very dynamic and are bringing a lot of knowledge around the sector and the areas that they work in. And so coming together with this group that I don't know very well and seeing how that works, and then also learning about the various different ways in which this information can be got out to a community, and then obviously learning about what's going on in the hospitality industry. So I happen to have had a little bit of capacity, so I thought this is one way that I can leverage off what I know, working with a group of people to put something back into the community, and a group that need a bit more support and moral support than other groups in the community at the moment. So that's broadly why I'm involved.
Sure. And in terms of being involved, and what are you seeing have been the common issues that people within the hospitality, either both from an employer point of view and employee point of view, are having to navigate through this period? Because I'm sure it would be quite different to, say, our professions where they're professional services and we kind of can get on with it.
That's exactly right. So, over a very short period, they've had to close down their businesses, stand down staff, and as a consequence of the direction from the government that people weren't to be going into public spaces and using their venues. So all of a sudden, a lot of people being out of employment. And it took a little period of time, as we know, before the JobKeeper scheme and the government announced its various support packages to small and medium-sized businesses. So certainly it was a mad scramble and a very challenging time for them, as well as many other small businesses around Australia. And then the JobKeeper was announced, and the philosophy behind that is a great one, which is not only to provide some financial support to the workforces of these businesses, but also to encourage them to remain connected, so that both those people have a line of connection back into their former employer or their current employer, and so that they can be around potentially when the time comes for them to reopen. So a great philosophy behind that, but there's a lot of bureaucracy involved in navigating the packages and the JobKeeper scheme and how that operates, and what to do with staff who have been stood down. In hospitality, it's much more clear-cut because it's most staff that have been stood down, apart from those that have managed to pivot and continue some low-level operations around doing takeaway and that type of thing. But certainly there's questions about who's eligible, the casuals that have been only more recently employed fall through the gaps, and so do that large group of workers who are visa holders who have come, many of them are students that are using that employment as their financial support as they get themselves educated in Australia. So all of a sudden they no longer have that support because they're not eligible for JobKeeper. So that's been another bit of what I would describe as a real challenge for the hospitality industry, because that's a major component of their workforce, and all of a sudden those people are not being supported anymore. So navigating the legislation, and when you're a small business person, there's only so much time you've got to do that, or interest in understanding the fine detail. So helping people understand the fine detail is really important, and so interaction through webinars and things is certainly one way to get the information out. Well, what I've learned about the hospitality industry is that they're incredibly close-knit community and very passionate about what they do. So unlike many other business owners, it's a dream for them to open up a venue. Are very passionate people. So, the emotional fallout from the impact on that industry is certainly, I think, something that we would all acknowledge is pretty major, because we all go into cafes. We use that as our second office, and so we all know someone who's impacted. So that in broad terms, I think it's something that we can all identify with. And in fact, the workforce is so large and so encapsulates one of our vulnerable parts of our community, in addition to the visa holders, and that is young people. And I know that firsthand because I've got a 19-year-old son who's employed in a fast food outlet, and I'd have to say that Nando's were an excellent employer of my son, and have looked after him so well, and it was my son's first job, and I would almost have paid Nando's, I think, to take him on board, because young people learn such amazing skills working in the hospitality industry. So I'm very grateful for that. So this is a way of paying back in that sense. Yeah.
I agree with that. My first job was at McDonald's, and I think I learned so many skills, and it just throws you in the deep end, so to speak, communicating with people, dealing with issues, dealing with happy clients. So
exactly. Yeah, working in a team, being reliable, learning new skills. I would definitely have supplemented his wage just to pay Nando's to take him on. So it's been a great experience so far for him.
Awesome. From your point of view and from your discussions with people within hospitality, what do you think, I suppose, the hospitality world will look like after we come out of this period, or this COVID-19 situation?
Well, I'm learning. I am learning lots of things that I didn't know about before, because it hasn't been an industry that I've spent a huge amount of time working in from an employment perspective. But some of the impacts are going to be that, we know that venues pride themselves on their customer engagement and their service, and I think there's going to be possibly less time able to be spent on those areas, because after we get up from our tables and leave, they're going to be getting their rags out and cleaning the bench tops down and the seats down to, remove the germs. And so that's one bit of change. We know that the social distancing requirements at the moment are having an impact on all places, but that is going to have an ongoing impact potentially as we ease out of the lockdown. And I think it's 2 squared area that you're meant to keep available around you. So that's going to reduce the number of people in venues and have an impact on business models, I suspect, around how we wine and dine and how many people can be kept in venues, and impact business models. And so I think we'll see a large impact on the numbers of venues that are available, or able to sustain themselves. And their dilemmas that face, obviously, a lot of industries and businesses at the moment, not least the legal profession as well. So they're definitely some of the changes. In broad terms, businesses that continue to innovate, businesses that have online presences, including venues and, you know, restaurants and cafes, the ones that have already done that hard work, are not finding it difficult to continue to reach out to their customers and continue the conversation, keep in contact with them, and then if they do choose to go down the takeaway route, being able to, you know, get that message out readily. Those that have done that already are the ones that are more likely to survive as we go forward, and unfortunately there's going to be a big impact on, you know, a lot of the smaller players that haven't innovated and haven't kept up with the technology.
Yeah, it's interesting. In terms of, I suppose I wanted to move on to flexible work arrangements, which is something that you've been quite passionate about and something we've spoken about in the past. How do you think, I suppose, employers are going to handle flexible working solutions or arrangements going forward after COVID? Because I would, suspect that, you know, more employees would want it going forward. And they would use COVID as a reference point that it can be done. What's your views there?
Well, I am passionate about promoting the idea of flexibility, and one of the arguments to date has been that, you know, a range of roles are just not aligned with working more flexibly, whatever that does mean to people. And we have now, in one foul sweep, overnight virtually, seen everyone have to become flexible and to adapt and to test everyone's roles around how it can be done remotely. And there's no question that I suspect that the experiment's been extremely successful, and that a lot of people see now that, because they've just had to adapt and learn new skills, as we were talking about before, in using Zoom, we all have had to learn heaps of skills very quickly. It sped up the learning process, and so now we can manage to be anywhere to do our jobs. We can use these audiovisual platforms to engage with people. We can have more control over our day. People have had a taste for that, and what we're talking about is the whole workforce has had a taste for that, both senior managers, middle managers, staff. And I think one of the surprises is going to be how many people are actually enjoying it and possibly finding that they're more productive, even those people that were naysayers in the past. So there is a revolution underfoot at the moment, and COVID-19, that's one of the great positives that's come out of it, that we've all learnt very quickly and adapted very quickly. And whilst sometimes that change can be difficult and challenging, I think in the longer term there's going to be benefits for everyone in being adaptable and being flexible in how we approach everything that we do.
In terms of, I suppose, companies and even law firms, what should they be doing now to get their workforce set up for flexibility and in the future?
Well, I think we're about 4 weeks into this crisis / new experience / new normal that we're working within. And so a lot of employers will have already adapted. And whilst I would think that I could generalise around large employers possibly doing it better because they're better supported around the technology that they've got in place, I don't think necessarily even they have, you know, there's been instances of, say, law firms that have really resisted allowing their staff to move home for as long as they could, which I thought was a curious approach, other than that it indicated that they weren't prepared yet for their staff to be able to work remotely. But a lot of large firms obviously have the technology set up around the software and the computers. It's been much harder for medium and smaller firms that haven't been on that journey to date. So if they haven't been on that journey, they are doing that now, I would anticipate, and putting those things in place. And the key features of that really are having the technological software in place, such as Office document management systems, so that, for example, you know, everyone can be somewhere different and be working on a file together as a basic sort of proposition. But there are a lot of firms that don't even have that in place. I think there's probably not been a huge take-up of using the audio-visual technologies, and now, again, overnight, we're all using it. You know, I know for myself that I had been looking at Skype for professionals and thinking, oh, you know, that looks interesting. I must think about putting that on. I don't know what it's going to cost. It's going to cost too much. And not quite ready for it. And bingo. Now, you know, not a problem. Put it in place. We can do this. So that's remarkable. And I think offices as well that we're moving towards paperless or paperlight. The firms that haven't got the technology in place are the ones that are having to think about taking a file home, a hard copy file home, or multiple hard copy files home. I mean, it's just mind-boggling to get your mind around it if you're still doing that. There are a lot of firms still doing that, whereas those that have made that adjustment and leap, you know, have all their documents online, have them in a shared facility, and groups of people can be working on them. So it's making that leap that is going to make or break a lot of businesses and a lot of law firms, particularly small and medium-sized law firms who haven't done that. But yeah, so if they have done that, then there's no question that flexibility is going to be easy. And the other major component of this change that I've observed is the importance around improving on your communication. So I think when we were in an office, we took for granted that we saw people in the corridor, or we would have team meetings and we'd talk about matters. But obviously now we're all in different locations, so you have to make some effort to come together as a group. But what I have found is that people actually need that human contact more regularly than they might have before. And so we, for example, have daily meetings now, whereas before we were having weekly meetings. And it's playing a really strong role in building team and supporting people in their various environments at home. And in many ways, I think we're getting to know more about each other than we did before, and we're having a stronger sense of team than we ever had before. Maybe it's the adversity, the experience of adversity that's bringing us together. But you know, as lawyers, we probably think we're good communicators, but this is now testing again who are really the good communicators and who are the good team builders. And if we have shortcomings in that area, then now's a good time to be working on those things.
What I'm seeing is a lot of people, I suppose it's putting our guards are being put down, or we're becoming more personable and more approachable. It's that feeling of, you know, we're not just, you know, a lawyer, we're actually a human being as well, and we've got emotions and things like that. We've got families. So I think it's really nice to see that happening, especially in the legal profession.
Yeah, it's absolutely humanised us, and it's humanised us in the eyes of our clients probably. And we had a bit of a chat before this catch up about the pictures and things that people have behind them. You know, what story is that telling about that person? How much thought do we put into that as a means of a conversation? You know, cats and partners and children coming into the room shakes things up a bit, and certainly humanises our engagement with people. So as you said, I think there's a sense of vulnerability, and we have all been through a really difficult experience. It's only 4 weeks down. I'm sure everyone would agree that it feels much longer, that it's been going on for much longer, and it's a shared experience. Everyone is in the same position, and you know, I think it's a beautiful opportunity, unless you're in a state of trauma for, you know, reasons that are not able to be coped with. But for everybody else, it really is an amazing opportunity now to dig deep into oneself about, you know, how do you want to live your life, and also how do you want to connect with people. And that is a conversation that possibly lawyers don't typically have as much. They don't allow themselves to have that because we're so focused on getting our jobs done and working in our rational brains and delivering services and advice without thinking about the human component and the emotional element of what's going on for everybody. And you have to talk about the emotion first before you can move into the rational brain and actually do the work. So learning how to do that is going to be important, and something that certainly I talk about quite a bit with my colleagues in our daily catch-ups.
Yeah. From your point of view, what do you think the legal profession is going to look like in the future after COVID?
Well, I think that, unfortunately, flowing from what I've just observed about the requirements of successful firms, now what you need to have in place to continue to operate, is going to mean that possibly we'll see quite a few firms just decide that it's too hard. And I know that the stats say in the state of Victoria are that, you know, we've got a lot of firms with founders who are in the older, latter stages of their professional careers, and, you know, that they might get to a point where they decide either because adjusting mindset is too difficult, or it just seems so overwhelming. So you have to introduce a whole lot of changes now to make yourself more nimble and agile and responsive to client needs. That it's just going to be too hard. And so I think that that's going to lead people to really reassess whether it's viable to continue, and whether they still have the passion for the law in the new way that we are being forced to operate now. And, you know, these conversations are being had by many people when we talk about innovation and the pressures on the legal profession to change. You know, Richard Susskind and his book about lawyers tomorrow, you know, that has foreshadowed already all the things that are going to be needed of law firms to survive, and we're just now being really pushed to that moment where we have to make those decisions and make those calls about how viable we are, and if we're not, if these are the things that are a must have in your firm if you are going to survive beyond COVID-19. So that's one of the major changes. The flexibility element, I think maybe previously I've said to you, you know, I think accounting firms, for example, have been much more successful in implementing flexibility across the board, across their whole organisations, and now law firms finally will catch up out of this. So that's fantastic. That's great for women in particular, and/or parents looking after children, that we have more control over our days, and we can still do the work, but we can also have our other interests, whether it's children or, you know, other passions that we pursue, and manage to fit that into our lives without these strict, sort of structured, traditional models of how we do work. So that's all good change.
It is good. I'm looking forward to seeing what it looks like in the future. In terms of I suppose I want to move on to, you know, from an employer point of view, what should they be doing to help their employees who are working from home to, firstly, one, ensure they are working in a safe environment, and secondly, that they are mentally and emotionally okay?
Yeah, good questions. Well, in broad terms, I think the first step is ensuring the ergonomics are set up properly, and that may or may not involve a small investment right at the outset. But generally speaking, it just means helping your staff get their ergonomic chair from the office to home, setting up the second monitor at home. I, for example, have been putting off getting a standing desk, so I finally ordered that. So I'm really looking forward to changing the way I sit at my desk going forward. So ergonomics, I touched on the fact that having the regular team meetings is important, and team meetings are not just about talking about how much work have you got on your plate, how, you know, what's the workflow issue, what's happening with clients, but it's also about checking in with people and how they are sort of faring at this time. There's no question that there's an emotional impact that is in play and has been in play for the last 4 weeks, because we are adapting, we're having to deal with so much change. And yes, there are people that already were working out of home offices, so it's just been a seamless transition for them. But, you know, if you look at the CBD at the moment, as we talked about, it's a zombie land. There's no one there. So all those people that had a daily routine of going into the office are no longer doing that anymore. And they're coming back and they're adjusting back into a remote setup and working with their out of their homes. And, you know, in their homes, they're now juggling a whole lot of other things as well. They're juggling being at closer quarters with their families, and that I think is the big sleeper for the current period, is the number of people who are parents or co-parenting who have got children who are generally primary school age down to 0, and having those young people in the house, and how you balance your work with having people in the house who are being effectively homeschooled or schooled through the remote in the room with their schools, but, you know, parents are still having to supervise. So that's been interesting, because as we know, that was again another barrier to this concept of flexibility. But I think what organisations and managers really need to listen out for is the burden that is placing on staff at the moment. And there's a sense of, you know, burning the candle at both ends, because they're trying to get up early to do work, look after their kids during the day, and then, you know, working late at night. And there's a bit of a wear and tear to that. So just acknowledging those changes, or young people moving back home with their parents, that's also been interesting, or people just moving, you know, into the countryside and maybe not being set up well, technologically speaking. So, you know, there's a lot of challenges. Getting people to talk about that and showing interest in that is coming back to our conversation about the human component. How do we be more human in what we do? And it's a great opportunity. So, so safe work is about the mental health state and the physical state in terms of how we're working. And then how we're communicating with people around change, and doing that, you know, in a best practice way is, again, what managers need to think about, given there is so much change underway at the moment. And, you know, and managing the fact that client work, you know, the requirements of clients is different. It's reducing. The clients are stressed as well. So how do we get our lawyers become much more sensitive and having conversations that tap into emotions with their clients as well in a sensitive way, so we can feel able to support them in the experiences they're going through, which are often way worse than our own. You know, acting for retail clients who have had to stand down, you know, large workforces, that's really grueling, and being very human in how we come to our conversations with people is something that we can be learning, and we need to learn how to do that really well.
Yeah. Now, I just had a thought that came into my head. I wanted to ask you, obviously, when we go to the office, there's a standard of, you know, what we look like, what we wear, how we represent ourselves, hair, makeup, things like that. How will, if I suppose more people are working flexibly, what policies there to come into place? Like, what's going to be acceptable to, you know, can I jump on a call with a client with my hair done in a messy bun and like no makeup and, you know, my tracky ducks? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, how does that work? Look, I think that there's already, before COVID, there's been a move to a much more casual look in how people dress up for work, and less structured, less hard edges, and probably the cutting edge workplaces that we see in the IT sector have led the way in that, you know, a more groovy way of working, and smart casual being the way to go. So that's loosened things up in a really positive way. I do think that you probably still need to coach your young professional people, old professional people, to have some sense of professionalism around how they present themselves in meetings on Zoom. There's no reason to let one's standards slip as much as one might see some people doing that. But certainly as a professional person, I think one should give a little bit of thought to, you know, how you're presenting and what you look like. And I personally just think at the moment that there is there's such a stress on our community. There's a lot of talk of doom and gloom. All the media is just focused on terrible, terrible news every single day. So if I can do something in my engagement with people and my video conferencing where, there's a picture behind me or I'm wearing a bit of colour, bring on some more colour into our world is my philosophy at the moment. So maybe and introducing a little bit of fun as well doesn't go astray. I think one of the things that I've learned is the place of memes in our survival kit at the moment, and so we need to work out how we can facilitate a little bit of lightheartedness as well as we survive this together.
Yeah. Now, I'm hoping you can share your top 5 positives of COVID.
Well, I think we've touched on a few of them. So I think moving towards the remote working so quickly as we have, has been a real positive. Being trained up on these audiovisual platforms is incredible, and another means now of conducting work that we probably just didn't think was possible. Many of us didn't think was possible in the past. The role of memes I mentioned, and I think, and I guess on the point of memes and jokes, you would agree there's a lot of jokes moving around. So I'm having to be a little bit conscious about what I do post, given that I'm a senior person in my own business, that I set the tone around the types of things that I post. So giving a bit of thought as well about that, and making sure they're not too offensive in joke land. And I guess the other point is something that I have touched on, which is that this shared sense of an experience means that we all have a common language around what's going on for people and for ourselves, and tapping in with people about our vulnerabilities and impact on our personal lives. I would hope and think will bring us in a much more connected way closer to people and having better conversations. And with that particular point, I certainly hope that that's something that we carry forward beyond this period of time, that we can feel that we've learned a different way of connecting and a better way of connecting. So that's I think a positive as well from this period.
And before we wrap up, is there anything you want to, I suppose, lasting thought you want to leave our audience with?
A lasting thought. I guess my main thought is that it is, if one has the right mindset, it is an opportunity to, do some self-reflecting on how you live your life, and to discover that there's many components to it that can be rediscovered. So what I've noticed, and you probably have as well, is that our parks are full of people at the moment. People, of course, can only walk with another person, but what I'm finding is that I'm on a bit of a journey around listening to podcasts, for example, and I'm finding that very stimulating, and sort of bringing the ideas of what I'm hearing from other people. I feel like it's a much more global world, listening to other voices and from different countries, different ideas. So it's a time that we can possibly be a little bit more creative as well about the things that we're doing, and people that are agile and adaptable are the ones that are probably going to thrive in a time of crisis. So helping ourselves and helping others survive and be adaptable is something that I encourage everyone around me to do, and also thinking about how do you give back at this time as well, if you have the capacity to do that.